Just a little something from me, the Dove Lady, that I want to put in here right now. I used to think it was a negative thing that my family, my kids, my spouse, nobody was interested in these kind of books I read to you on YouTube. But it wasn't a negative, and it wasn't an accident. And one reason is that now, in order to have some way to facilitate my need to express these thoughts, I've made these videos, and many people can benefit, many more than just my children. And who knows, the time might come that they also will listen to them because they're here, and it's a legacy I can give them. And someday they may, very well may, listen to them and be benefited. But if I were to say, oh, this is just a negative thing, that they're not interested, I would be making a lot of judgments that are not called for. And I can't say that I haven't thought that. I have. I admit it. I have thought, oh, I wish they were interested in the things I'm interested in. I wish that I knew people that I could get into conversations with about these things I'm reading about. Sometimes I do get in conversations with some of you who listen to my videos. And I love your comments. Anytime you want to leave a comment, feel free. I usually answer any comment that I get. But the things that we call bad, and if we continue to call them bad, could turn into things that don't bless. I mean, I could just probably say, oh well, nothing I think is important to me is important to my family, so I'll just wallow in bitterness and unhappiness and then not make these videos, and then that would be the loss to me and to others. So I think we just take the things and make them what we can that happen to us and not call it an accident, because it was probably meant to be this way. Anyway, I do hope that someday they will listen to my videos. I've made over 2,000 videos, I think, by now. Surely someday they'll listen to them. But if they don't, I'm cool with that. I'm all right with it. We got lots of chances at this. Maybe it might be in another lifetime. It's not for me to determine that it's bad or not good that it doesn't happen right when I want it to. Because that's really just ego and selfishness on my part if I think that way. Anyway, it's brought me a lot of peace of mind to see it in this way. When I didn't see it in that way, it brought me a lot of remorse. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that little bit of insight of my experience with the truth of what Seth is speaking of here in these words that I'm reading you about. There are no accidents. Okay, next chapter. Seth quotes chapter 9. Comments to those with a serious illness. Seth. If you cut your finger, it is no accident. If you stub your toe, it is no accident. If you come down with the flu or with a virus, it is no accident. If you have a chronic physical difficulty, it is no accident. If you are creative, it is no accident. If you get good news, it is no accident. If lovely things happen to you, it is no accident either. You form your reality, and this applies all the way up or down the scale, from the consciousness you now have to the tiniest molecule in the tiniest eyelash on your body. It is only when you are not willing to face consciously your own beliefs and face them through and make distinctions that seemingly unconscious accidents occur, when all of a sudden you are not as quick as you should be, or when all of a sudden your reactions are not as good, when a car comes that should not be there. Each of you have your own ways, and an event that seems horrendous from the outside, from the inside, from your private viewpoints, may be something else entirely. You can rid yourself of any illnesses which you realize that you create, and draw such illness to yourself. What you fear most, you draw to yourself. Now, if you decide to leave this world, that is your own right. Go in joy and vitality, but go because you know you decided to leave, and not as a victim of a disease that has been given a name. On the other hand, if you decide you want to continue to live, then live in your full glory and strength. If you decide to live, then tell yourself you want to live and know the reasons, and your body will repair itself in joy and glory. You are not a victim. While such situations as illnesses are chosen by the personality, the individual is always left to work out its own solution. Complete recovery, illness, or early death are not preordained on the part of the entity or whole self. The general situation is set up in response to deep inner involvements. The problem is a challenge set up by the entity for one of its own personalities. But the outcome is up to the personality involved. One does not choose illness per se for a lifetime situation. The inner self, as distinguished from the more accessible subconsciousness, is aware of the situation and finds release through frequent inner communications where successes are remembered and re-experienced. The dream state becomes an extremely vivid time, for such experiences assure the personality of its larger nature. It knows it is more than the self that it has for a time chosen to be. You need to learn the power of thought and emotion. Once you realize that your thoughts form reality, then you are no longer a slave to events. True self-knowledge is indispensable for health and vitality. The recognition of the truth about the self simply means that you must first find out what you think about yourself subconsciously. If it is a good image, build upon it. If it is a poor one, recognize it as only the opinion you have held of yourself and not an absolute state. You are not your emotions. They flow through you. You feel them, and then they disappear. When you try to hold them back, they build up. You must learn to trust your own spontaneous nature. Your nervous system knows how to react. It reacts spontaneously when you allow it to. In spontaneity, there is a discipline that utterly escapes you, and an order beyond any that you know. Spontaneity knows its own order. Seth quotes chapter 10, Death Experience. Seth, according to what you have been taught, you are composed of physical matter and cannot escape it. And this is not so. The physical matter will disintegrate, but you will not. I can assure you that death is another beginning. You have lived before and you will live again. And when you are done with physical existence, you will still live. I want you to feel your own vitality. Feel it travel through the universe and know that it is not dependent upon your physical image. I am life and I am death. Now, when death can talk about death, that is your answer. Only the living are so mute. Think of your definitions. In certain terms, you are all dead and have been for centuries. In other terms, you are not yet born, and centuries will come before you walk upon the surface of the earth. Yet you are alive, and you take it for granted that I am dead, and so what a delightful game we play. What I am trying to show you is that individuality continues. Now, I have been born and died more times than I can remember, and yet, in my present state, my individuality continues. It is not my essence. It is not buried in some bovine goodness in which I must think beautiful thoughts and become lost in the beauty of the universe. I am part of the beauty of the universe, and as such, my individuality continues, as does your own. You sense here the energy of your being, and it is death and it is life, for the two are one and united, and in your terms are the faces of the same reality. You will never know in your terms again the self that you are now, and yet it will never end, and you will always remember it. Yet there is a history, in other terms, to your being, And you can read that history. In your terms, you can look backward toward reincarnational lives, but they are not you. Life implies death, and death implies life. That is, in the terms of your world. You could not die unless you were the kind of creature who was born, nor could you have a present moment as you consider it. Your body is aware of the fact of its death at birth, and of its birth at its death, for all of its possibilities for action take place in the area between. Death is therefore as creative as birth, as necessary for action and consciousness in your terms. Here, time as you think of it has little meaning. You could compare the two different time experiences in this way. In your dimension, it is as if remembered events were like pieces of furniture all arranged in one room in a given order. Living in that room, you can find your way between various pieces easily. You then move out into a larger and different kind of room, and here the furniture may be rearranged in any fashion. Arranged and rearranged to your heart's content. You may form different combinations from it and use it for different purposes, as you might visit a new residence and move some of your belongings there before you officially make it your own. There will be guides to help you, and you will hardly notice that you have entirely moved in, for you will feel so at home. Shortly, training periods will begin. It will become your turn then to help others and be their source of strength. Now, the new body is, of course, not a new one at all, but simply a body not physical in your terms, one that you use in astral projections, one that gives the vitality and strength to the physical body that you know. Your flesh is embedded in it now. When you leave the physical body, the other body is quite real to you and seems physical, although it has many more freedoms. First of all, there are verbal difficulties having to do with the definition of life. It appears to you that there is living matter and non-living matter, leading to such questions as, how does non-living matter become living? There's no such thing in your terms as non-living matter. There is simply a point that you recognize as having the characteristics that you have ascribed to life or living conditions, a point that meets the requirements that you have arbitrarily set. This makes it highly difficult in a discussion, however, for there is no particular point at which life was inserted into non-living matter. There is no point at which consciousness emerged. Consciousness is within the tiniest particle. There was no point at which the consciousness was introduced, because consciousness was the illumination from which the first cells emerged. There is a design and a designer, but they are so combined, the one within and the one without, that it is impossible to separate them. The Creator is also within His creations, and the creations themselves are gifted with creativity, and that each contains an infinite capacity for development, and that each is innately blessed. In the dawn of physical existence, men knew that death was merely a change of form. What you call death is rather your choice to focus in other dimensions and realities. You do not acquire a spirit at death. You are one now. You adopt a body as a space traveler wears a spacesuit, and for much the same reason.